Basically, the terrorism threats are at an all-time high, and they see the southern border as, a major piece of that some of these people on these terrorism watch lists could be getting in that way. So in order for them to feel like they are able to support this bill with a ton of funding for Ukraine and Israel, which a lot of these Republican senators do support.
Right.
They feel like this is their responsibility to be able to do something about this. And Democrats, on the other hand, really feel like some of their ideas are very radical to crack down on even legal immigration. So, they have their side too.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by Congressional reporter Samantha-Jo Roth. SJ, there's been a surprising development. Senate Republicans are asking for help from a very unlikely source. Who might that be?
Yeah, so today, Senate Republicans, this is all after their supplemental aid request was not able to pass the Senate. Obviously, they had been working on trying to get some kind of immigration deal in the midst, in addition to the funding for Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan. And that just doesn't look like it's anywhere close in sight. So today, a big group of Republicans said we need to negotiate directly with the White House. We are tired of negotiating with Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who has been kind of leading the charge on this.
Right.
Senator Lindsey Graham today saying that Murphy doesn't really understand the fundamental problems,
Right.
and it's really impossible for them to negotiate with someone who doesn't know the issues. So that was a little bit of a burn to the Connecticut senator.
But it's kind of a big deal because Lindsey Graham is one of the last senators, perhaps the last Republican senator left, who was involved in the last round of semi-successful border and immigration talks that were bipartisan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Senator Lindsey Graham, was a part of that King of Eight. And the interesting thing today is some reporters had asked him if he would be open to some kind of DACA deal in the midst of this, and he snapped back and said, no,
Right.
This is not about immigration. This is about border security and stopping the flow of immigration from the southern border. And basically what this group of Republicans are saying is they're looking at the testimony from Christopher Wray just this week saying every single light is blinking. Basically, the terrorism threats are at an all-time high, and they see the southern border as, a major piece of that some of these people on these terrorism watch lists could be getting in that way. So in order for them to feel like they are able to support this bill with a ton of funding for Ukraine and Israel, which a lot of these Republican senators do support.
Right.
They feel like this is their responsibility to be able to do something about this. And Democrats, on the other hand, really feel like some of their ideas are very radical to crack down on even legal immigration. So, they have their side too. So, I mean,
Right.
It's really impossible to see how exactly they're going to be able to come together. But this is sort of where we are.
And so spending is really held up on multiple fronts. I mean, you mentioned Ukraine, you mentioned aid to Israel. At some point, there's going to need to be funding of other aspects of the government on a more permanent basis. Is there any real sign of progress or hope, or are we still kind of stuck on all these things?
I think we're sort of stuck, and there's so many things that they need to get accomplished right now. I mean, we have 2 deadlines coming up in January and February for these, bigger spending bills. We have,
Right.
The FAA reauthorization, NDAA, so many things that they need to get done. But
And those are considered must-pass pieces of legislation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm unsure. I mean, we've seen over the last couple of months, like when they, when push comes to shove with one of these deadlines, somehow they are able to get it together.
Right.
But the big thing is with this supplemental request, a lot of senators do not believe that it's going to get accomplished if it does not get accomplished before the end of the year. So they're really pushing for this to get done, and they want to see it done. And technically, these lawmakers are supposed to leave for their holiday recess
Right.
in about a week or so. So I think a lot of them are saying, we will stay here until this gets done. Whether that's actually the reality is another question. But I think that's sort of where we are right now, but we are already starting to hear that potentially the White House is getting involved. But the big question is, will the president himself be, making his way to Capitol Hill, or will he be inviting some of these folks up to the White House to show them that he's taking their concerns really seriously? And that sounds like that's what they're wanting.
Sure, although that hasn't always been the answer in the past.
Right, I mean, we've seen them go up to the White House, we've seen Biden go to the Capitol, and still no solutions, and sometimes they're even further apart than where they started. So it's not always the best to do that, but it sounds like these Senate Republicans are, pretty frustrated with the negotiating partners that they have on the other side of the aisle and are looking to switch it up.
So there is one impasse that's sort of plagued the Senate for a while that has at least been partially resolved. The whole controversy with Senator Tommy Tuberville and the Pentagon's abortion policy and the holds. What sort of happened there?
So earlier this week, Senator Tuberville finally relented and said he's going to drop some of his holds. He did say that he still is going to place a couple holds on some of these other, higher-ranking members, but this has been a big deal because he had been blocking unanimous consent to be able to bypass and get all of these groups of military officers confirmed to their new promotions. So this was a big deal. I think there was a collective sigh of relief on both sides of the aisle. I can tell you that Senate Republicans even told me that they were happy that they don't have to deal with this anymore. It wasn't a good look for them. And they recognized that.
But Tuberville didn't get what he wanted.
No, he absolutely did not get what he wanted. He's trying to spin it saying, he's going to keep fighting, all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, he was not able to get what he wanted, and that was a change in the Pentagon abortion policy, where they were going to fund service members' travel to be able to get some of those reproductive services. And he, did not. He opposed that, and that's why he put these holds in the first place. But he, at the end of the day, did have to relent and step back. I think the pressure was just way too much from his party. They were, people behind the scenes. I think it was rumblings at first, where people were not speaking out. But we saw senators like Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska. He was pretty upset. We saw Senator Ernst. Both of these people served in the military. They're on the Armed Services Committee. I think everyone.
From pretty conservative states.
Exactly. So I think they're realizing this was not a winning issue for them. So finally, huge batches of those military commanders were able to be confirmed to the Senate, and that was a big deal earlier this week.
Have to see if it starts a trend.
We'll see.
Thank you, SJ.
Thank you.
You can read Samantha-Jo and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.